Ukrainian viewers often write to me saying that I probably don't like Ukraine very much if I talk so often about theft, corruption, and the Ukrainian leadership's unwillingness to end the war. Sometimes they imply it, and sometimes they even write it outright, that I work for Putin, for the globalists, or for someone else like Soros. I want to officially state that yes, I do work, but for Honduras. Why, you may ask? Because they pay. They pay with bananas. Well, seriously, ladies and gentlemen, I thought I had made my position clear many times about who attacked and who is responsible for the huge number of horrific crimes committed on the territory of Ukraine. So, to make it absolutely clear to everyone, please watch today's video, this one right here. And I really hope that you will have no doubts left. And I have a big request for all your friends and acquaintances who have ever watched my videos and decided that I have some kind of anti-Ukrainian stance, pro-Russian or something else. Please send them the link or whatever it's called so they can watch it too. So let's first talk about what I would call propaganda versus reality, or what was said about Moscow, what was actually happening. And then we'll develop this into a discussion about how this war was going, how it's going now, and where it will go. On February 24, 2022, Vladimir Putin appeared on Russian television screens and said the word denazification. That is, it means the cleansing of Nazism from Ukraine. In the 4 years, already too many, this word has become an order, a cover for the deportation of hundreds of thousands of children, the recruitment of murderers and rapists straight from prison barracks, and the purchase of soldiers in North Korea and Africa, and a war in which their own soldiers are deceived just as shamelessly as the rest of the world is. Today I'll break down what the Kremlin promised, what it actually did, and why even its own soldiers, when they end up on the front lines, terrify their own mothers. And the horror of a single phrase, "Mom, you can't imagine what it's really like here." There will be 5 parts in this video. First, the official narrative of the war. Why? Supposedly, Russia had to go to war. Then what was really happening on the ground, from Bucha to the deportation of children and the torture of prisoners. Next, the inner workings of the war, how people were lured to the front, who was recruited from prisons in other countries, and how much they were paid. The 4th part is about what even Kremlin critics find uncomfortable to talk about. How the money that Europe pays for Russian gas and oil has been funding this war for years, and in the end, she showed the faces. How the very same people who do this at home sanctimoniously condemn other people's wars. I promise there will be a few numbers that will really make your jaw drop, let's say. What else could drop? God. Well, about everything. We'll talk about all of this in order. So, part 1. The narrative. The official version of the Russian government goes something like this. Ukraine has been taken over by Nazis. Ukrainians are oppressing the Russian-speaking population of Donbass. NATO is preparing a foothold to attack Russia, and the only way to protect the Russian world. And the Ukrainians themselves, by the way, too. Yes, this is a special military operation that will continue. Well, as the head of RT, Margarita Simonian, promised in the first days, she literally promised 2 days. She knew for sure. She's just the generalissimo. The problem is that the president, who was called a Nazi, Zelensky, an ethnic Jew whose family lost relatives in the Holocaust. The problem is that the denazification of a country with a democratically elected government turned out not to be the overthrow of a regime, but mass killings of civilians. And the problem is that the rhetoric didn't change even when Russia itself officially admitted that to continue this war, it has to recruit murderers from prisons and buy soldiers. You know, from places like North Korea, Africa, wherever they can. Can someone who was serving time for murder just 2 days ago now officially be liberating a brotherly nation from Nazism? Somewhere in this formula, something is catastrophically wrong. Vladimir Solovyov, the host of the main political talk show on the Rossiya 1 channel back in 2021 while commenting on Zelensky's election as president, called Ukrainians Nazi scum live on air. And he promised viewers that Russian troops would liberate Ukraine from the fascists. Anton Krasovsky from the RT channel in one of the broadcasts called for people to stop thinking of Ukrainians as brothers in the context of a direct call for their destruction. And he claimed that the territory of Ukraine is our ancestral Russian land. And director Nikita Mikhalkov, no more no less, in January 2023 with a straight face, told viewers that special birds infected with diseases were being sent from Ukraine to Russia. And this is a fascist attempt to exterminate, as he said, the Slavic people. That is, accusing the opponents of Russian aggression of fascism. But he didn't have to do that. He shouldn't have. He was already a lackey. All right, and now this is where it gets really interesting. Because from here on, I'm not going to tell you an opinion or propaganda from either side, but what has been documented by the UN, Human Rights Watch, and independent investigations, with names, dates, and specific geolocations. Well, watch until the moment where I tell you what the official memorial in Pyongyang looks like, dedicated to North Korean citizens who died for the Russian army, heroes of North Korea. Russian propaganda won't show you this. So, part 2, what really happened. Bucha and Irpin, Kyiv region, March 2022. After the withdrawal of Russian troops, at least 14 civilians were shot dead on Yablonska Street in a stretch of just 150 meters. 10 men, 3 women, and a girl. Satellite images, verified by the New York Times. They showed that the bodies had been lying on the street for 3 weeks before the Russian military left the city. This directly contradicts the official version of the Russian Ministry of Defense, which claimed that the photos were staged and taken after they had left. Nothing of the sort. Everything was filmed at the time when they did it. On the same street, a drone captured the moment when a Russian armored vehicle opened fire with a large caliber weapon. They opened fire on an ordinary cyclist who had simply come around the corner onto a street occupied by Russian vehicles. And the second armored vehicle finishes him off with 2 more shots. Finishes him off. The body was found in the same place after the city was liberated. So first, all of this was recorded by the drone, 1 shot at him, then finishing him off. And then after some time, when the city was liberated, they came and he was still lying there. No one had touched him. The Ukrainian prosecutor's office identified the soldier who shot the father of a 14-year-old boy in front of him. They were riding together on 2 bicycles. By the way, they were going to get humanitarian aid. Both of them had white armbands on their sleeves, indicating they were civilians. After the father died, the soldier shot at the boy as well. The bullet hit the hood of his jacket, and the teenager miraculously survived. In the village of Bohdanivka, a 46-year-old woman told Amnesty International investigators how Russian troops entered the settlement, placed tanks right on the streets, and shot a man in the head right before her eyes. In Homel, the son of a local resident, Volodymyr Zakliupanov, who stayed in the city when his parents fled, became a victim of one of the extrajudicial executions in this area. And at the crossing near Vorzel, according to an eyewitness, a car carrying a grandmother, a mother, and a daughter was shot up. The daughter was wounded, and the elderly woman was decapitated by a shot. There is also a documented case when a person returning to his car found it shot up and run over by a tank. Ladies and gentlemen, what I'm telling you is not about punitive squads. It's not the police. It's not about an offensive or fighting. These are civilians already in occupied areas who were being killed and shot. They were raped, stabbed, and left right there on the spot, after which, God knows, the military, Russian soldiers, different ones, not just one regiment, not just one division, completely different units, they left. That's right. The High Commissioner for Human Rights confirmed at least 422 civilian deaths directly in Bucha after the occupation. Throughout the Kyiv region, according to matching estimates from the Ukrainian investigation and the BBC, about 1,000 people were killed, of which around 650 were shot by Russian Federation soldiers. There were rapes. Human Rights Watch separately documented numerous rapes in the Chernihiv, Kharkiv, and Kyiv regions. One of the victims, whose name was changed by lawyers, was a woman whom Russian soldiers came back to 3 times, locking her in a house, and they raped her 3 times, each time as a group, even waiting until they fell asleep. She fled with her son across the entire country to Ternopil, and there she filed a report with the police. This became the first officially registered case about rape by Russian soldiers. Bucha's mayor publicly spoke about even more horrific cases, about women being shot and then their bodies run over by tanks. He said this was to hide evidence and intimidate the remaining residents. So basically just guys' tank crews. They raped and killed. Or maybe they didn't kill them, just put them under the tanks while they were still alive. Who knows? These ones won't tell us anymore. Good, sweet sons. Dads. I don't know, maybe someone's husbands, probably someone's friends, drinking buddies to someone. And now, the reason why the International Criminal Court issued an arrest warrant for Putin himself. Not for Bucha, but for the children. According to findings from an independent UN commission published in March 2026, the deportation of Ukrainian children was carried out according to a policy developed at the highest level of the Russian government, with the personal involvement of the president and the Commissioner for Children's Rights, Maria Lvova-Belova. From the very beginning. A well-planned operation. One of those they had prepared in advance. Official Russian reports, not Ukrainian, not Western, but specifically Russian, recorded the figure of 744,000 Ukrainian children taken from the occupied territories. Lvova-Belova herself previously spoke about more than 700,000 relocated children, so the numbers match. The mechanism is simple and documented. Children are placed with foster families in Russia without the consent of their parents or guardians. They are given Russian passports and the right to change their identity. In one of the cases confirmed by the UN Commission, 3 16-year-old boys from a children's social center in Donetsk were taken out as part of a group of 31 children, and despite having living relatives in Ukraine, they were assigned to different foster families. One of them was taken in by Maria Lvova-Belova herself. According to the UN Commission's assessment, 80 registered cases of deportation remain unresolved. The children have not been returned. Children from childcare institutions, especially younger children with disabilities, have the least chance of being returned. This is compounded by the systematic torture of military personnel. According to the data from the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, from mid-November 2025, Russian forces executed at least 20 Ukrainian military personnel. It doesn't matter that they signed all the necessary UN declarations, right at the place of capture. Yes, out of 129 released prisoners who were interviewed, almost all reported being tortured, with cruel treatment, including sexual violence. And it didn't matter whether they were men or women. Human Rights Watch, in December 1925, directly described this not as an isolated incident but as a widespread systemic practice, the goal of which was to break the captive's spirit and dignity. Ukrainian human rights defender and journalist Maxim Butkevich, who spent about 2 years in captivity, told the UN Commission about torture, beatings, electric shocks, deprivation of fresh air and sunlight, excessive physical exertion, forced video confessions, and lack of medical assistance. One of the interviewed released prisoners told the UN investigator a phrase that is worth remembering. No living being, no society deserves such treatment. Gentlemen, again, these are not special units, it's not Hitler or something, it's not the KGB. These are ordinary, normal, nice, wonderful, good Russian servicemen. Just think about it. A country that calls itself a protector and liberator officially admits in its own documents that it took 750,000 foreign children, while its own prisoners are numerous, testifies to systematic torture. If you think this only concerns Ukrainians, don't click away just yet. Next, I'll talk about what should concern you personally, what the new Army recruitment drive planned for this fall will look like, and why they are very carefully avoiding calling it mobilization, specifically so as not to provoke the same panic as in 2022. If you have relatives of conscription age in Russia, this concerns you personally. And next, I will tell you what is known as of today, so Part 3, the war machine from the inside. Officially, there was only one mobilization in Russia, September of 2022. 302,503 people, I believe, according to Putin's decree, from 1,430 municipalities. Additionally, 33,000 of them voluntarily went to military enlistment offices before getting their summons. Since then, the authorities have publicly denied a second wave, in 2023 and 2024 and 2025, and the last time, in June 2024, Putin himself stated that there is no need. But according to two independent investigative publications, which cite sources in military enlistment offices and in the presidential administration, a new recruitment phase is being prepared by October of this year, intentionally after the State Duma elections, intentionally without using the word mobilization. Officially, this will be called the continuation of the contract recruitment campaign. Staffing up, or a similar euphemism, simply to avoid the legal status of being mobilized and the panic associated with it. They plan to take in tens of thousands of people at military training grounds, with accelerated training and subsequent assignment to units. Moreover, the recruitment is primarily focused on the remote, outlying regions of the country. The correspondence of servicemen will be checked, especially thoroughly, so that not a single letter home hints at where exactly he was sent, what he is doing, the situation there, and so on. Nothing like that will be allowed anymore. At the same time, regarding contracts without mobilization, Russian sources mention different numbers. In 2023, according to the then Minister Shoigu, 540,000 people signed contracts. Putin himself said in December 2023 that there were 486,000 volunteers. In 2024, according to Medvedev, 190,000. Well, the official size of the army was increased by decree from September 2024 to 2.3 million people, of which 1.5 million are specifically military personnel, the rest are support staff. The Ministry of Defense does not publish any exact data at all about the recruitment for 2025-2026, not a word at all. Since the beginning of the war, according to independent estimates, at least 650,000 people have left Russia. And that means statistics from 70 host countries. These are only those who have not returned. Most people left for Armenia, Kazakhstan, Israel, and Georgia. So about 100,000 to each country, another 48,000 that is to the U.S. After the mobilization was announced in September 2022, according to a source close to the Kremlin, 600,000 people left. And some say 1 million people in just a few weeks. What happens to those who stay and go to the front? The answer. In intercepted phone conversations collected by Ukrainian intelligence services, some of which were independently confirmed by the New York Times, one soldier, for example, one tells his mother, "Mom, we haven't seen a single so-called fascist here." That's the full truth about denazification. Straight from the source, another soldier talking to his loved ones. "This is war, Mom. This is the dumbest decision our government has ever made." The third one talks about the scale of losses that the authorities are hiding, comparing the official and real numbers. What do you mean, 1,500? There were 14,000 at the beginning of the operation. Another one, after the retreat, talking to his family, "Our leadership totally abandoned us. They ran away." And along with the shock of reality, there are stories about the everyday life of war that send chills down your spine. One soldier tells his friend about looting in a casual tone, listing the things they took from other people's homes. Another identified by the security service of Ukraine as a resident of Astrakhan, boasts to his companion about torturing prisoners with a shovel. A soldier named Sergei calmly tells his girlfriend how they decided to simply shoot the detainees. Well, because feeding the prisoners is a burden. The official losses, acknowledged specifically by the Russian military, are 5,937 people. This number hasn't been updated since September 2022. The Independent, I think, name-by-name list from Mediazona and the BBC as of July 2026 is 230,000 dead. At the same time, the completeness of this list is estimated at only 45 to 65%. So, about half. That means 460,000. The NATO Secretary General in December 2025 mentioned the figure of 1 million casualties killed and wounded. On the Russian side, with a rate of about 1,200 people per day in 2025, the Center for Strategic and International Studies, as of July 2026, estimated 400,000 to 500,000 dead, and with the wounded and missing, 1.4 million. Well, I mean, the numbers kind of fluctuate back and forth within the same range, right? Desertion has reached such a scale that journalists from major news outlets, after obtaining leaked lists, started counting. No fewer than 49,000 Russian soldiers have been declared wanted for unauthorized absence from their units, or desertion right in the middle of combat operations. These are only those whose names appeared in the leaks. When they don't have enough of their own, they start recruiting outsiders, and literally from prison cells. Since July 2022, representatives of the Wagner PMC have been coming to correctional colonies, and since February 2023, exclusively representatives of the Ministry of Defense, offering prisoners a deal: 6 months as an assault trooper on the front line in exchange for a full pardon for murder, for rape, even just for drug dealing. According to documents from the Mediazona and BBC investigation called The Price of Bakhmut, well, the investigation was called The Price of Bakhmut, at least 48,000 people were recruited this way. Moreover, for 43.8 thousand of them, the specific colonies from which they were recruited have been identified. The founder of the PMC, Prigozhin, himself said in May 2023 that he had selected 50,000 prisoners. Well, I don't know if he selected and brought them to himself, or just selected them, we don't know. The organizer of the murder of journalist Anna Politkovskaya, Sergei Sajisadzhin. Kadzi Kurbanov, who is serving a sentence until 2034, went to war at the end of 2022, was pardoned, and was even awarded the Order of Courage. Artyom Buchin, sentenced to 20 years for the rape and murder of a nurse, enlisted in 2023, was wounded, pardoned, and a year later was detained again, this time on suspicion of murdering a woman and her 7-year-old daughter. The leader of a cult who committed ritual murders involving dismemberment and cannibalism was wounded at the front, pardoned in 2023, and in 2024 was convicted again, this time for drug trafficking. This is a systemic problem, not isolated cases. According to calculations by Novaya Gazeta Europe, in 2 years at least 107 people have been killed by former prisoners who returned from the war, right here, in civilian life, in Russia. Another 100 people suffered serious injuries from 91 offenders who were pardoned by Putin. Of these, 45 had previously been convicted specifically for murder. According to consolidated data, in the 2.5 years since the start of the war, 246 pardoned or conditionally released individuals plus 180 servicemen. That means they committed at least 211 deadly crimes on the territory of Ukraine itself. Ladies and gentlemen, former convicts killed more often than other soldiers and more often chose women as their victims. Ivan Rosomakin from the Kirov region raped and killed an 85-year-old retiree. Thousands of criminals are walking our streets. Artyom Grechkin from the Stavropol Krai robbed the summer house of a 71-year-old pensioner and killed him. Alexander Mamayev in the Nizhny Novgorod region stabbed his wife in the chest in front of their own children. She died. Igor Safonov was suspected of killing 6 people in the Karelian village of Derevyanoye. And at the same time, courts usually consider participation in the war as a mitigating circumstance. For especially serious crimes, including murders, those who returned received an average of 6 years. Well, that is, ladies and gentlemen. And even their own citizens literally started running out. According to South Korean intelligence, Russia has deployed more than 20,000 North Korean soldiers. They are officially paid, supplied with food, and presumably missile and space technologies in exchange. In April 2026, a memorial to the fallen was opened in Pyongyang. It bears 2,304 names. At the same time, South Korean intelligence estimates that their killed and wounded casualties are estimated at 6,000. South Korean intelligence also reported plans for a third phase of transferring about 6,000 more people, but they don't care. They get paid for it, or they are being traded. Plus, at least 48 countries where important stories confirmed the recruitment of mercenaries. Nepal. So, more than 600 people went through just one recruitment center. Here, at least 10 of them have already died. Local authorities, by the way, have arrested 17 recruiters and investigations are underway. Ghana, Cameroon, Senegal. So, Ukrainian intelligence counts 1,780 Africans from 36 countries. Out of them, 272 are from Ghana alone, and 55 have already died. Russia is simultaneously forming the so-called African Corps. This is a replacement for the Wagner PMC in Africa, with recruitment expanding in Burkina Faso. At the same time, according to Telegraph, Moscow was simultaneously maintaining a list of 43 countries, including China, Indonesia, Brazil, Turkey, and some African states. They banned the recruitment of their citizens in order not to damage diplomatic relations with allies. Part 4. Who is actually paying for this war? Now comes the most uncomfortable question. A contract soldier in St. Petersburg is paid a one-time sum of 4.5 million rubles for signing a contract today. In Moscow, it's 2 to 2.3 million, plus a monthly allowance starting from 200,000 and a city bonus of 50,000 every month. For the first year of service in Moscow, a contract soldier receives at least 5.4 million rubles. That's not counting combat bonuses. How does a country that officially admits a shortage of personnel and is forced to recruit prisoners and North Koreans find this kind of money for war? The answer is much less pleasant than one would like. For years, Europe has continued and continues to buy gas and oil from Russia for billions of dollars. Yes, in recent years, Moscow has actively shifted its focus to China and India as its main buyers, but the European market hasn't closed completely. Don't worry. And trade continues in the millions and millions. It creates a cynical picture. The same European countries that give Ukraine money for defense are at the same time giving money to Russia by buying energy resources, which allows Russia to continue the very war that Ukraine has to defend itself from. This is not some conspiracy or propaganda. It's simply balance of payments accounting, which people don't like to discuss out loud. In Brussels, they don't like to talk about it openly. And the last thing to remember, at the same time, Russian officials, including Sergei Lavrov, regularly condemn Israel for civilian casualties in Gaza, calling the situation unbearable, expressing outrage, criticizing the restrictions on humanitarian supplies, and demanding an immediate ceasefire. Well, maybe these are reasonable humanitarian demands, I don't know. But they are being voiced by a country that is waging a war at the very same time, with thousands of documented civilian casualties in a neighboring state, the deportation of hundreds of thousands of children, and systematic torture of prisoners of war, all confirmed by the UN. In Israel, it's not even close. In Israel, no one can even think about this. No one can even think about this. In Israel, everything possible is done to make sure, God forbid, that no harm comes to the civilian population, and they shoot back at the places they're being shot from. If that's located under a hospital, there's nothing you can do. You have to shoot in that direction because they're shooting from the hospital. The double standard is so obvious that even pro-Russian and simply independent commentators inside Russia itself are noticing it and asking questions. How can a country that demands others not to kill civilians at the same time officially acknowledge the removal of 744,000 other people's children? And finally, in conclusion, all of this is not a reason for despair, but a reason for clarity. Propaganda only works where there is no access to facts and no habit of verifying them. Every time we lay out the official story next to the documented reality with names, dates, and sources, that story falls apart on its own. And the more people, including those who are sitting in front of their TVs in Russia today, gain access to this overall picture, the shorter the path will be to the day when such wars will no longer be possible at all. Freedom begins with accurate knowledge. We have it. If you found this video interesting and useful, subscribe to the Leon Weinstein US Telegram channel. There I post short materials and analyses between the main episodes. See you in the next video. Yes, but if you haven't subscribed to this channel, please do, and hit the bell. Goodbye.